All right, so why don't we go ahead? So I'm Ann Ellis. For those of you who haven't met me, I have been with Psionic 2 years yesterday, and it's been an amazing 2 years. And then today with us, we have Dylan Warrington and Adam Aradia. For those of you who have been with us for quite some time, you know that these are two of our most tenured mobility specialists. They're also our resident exercise experts, and so we're really excited for them to continue working with you all on our exercise programs. So today we'll talk first about all of the modes of exercise in the Psionic app. So there are three types. We have timer activated, muscle activated, and biofeedback. So we'll go through with a primer on all of those for you and what the different benefits and features are. We'll also then talk about Psionic exercise programs in general and go through demonstrations and modifications. We understand that everyone has different needs, and the beauty of our system is it's flexible and you can make modifications that are a good fit for your own mobility. And then we will have Q&A throughout the session. So we'll stop after each topic and take questions. If there are additional questions that aren't related to the individual topics we're discussing, we'll save them and we can address them at the end. But there is the Q&A feature, so please submit questions in the Q&A. We will be monitoring that throughout the session. So first, before we get into the content, which I know is what everyone's excited about, we'll start with just a quick tutorial on optimizing the viewing experience. So if you are on a computer, you'll see in the top right corner this view button here. And so there are different options. So there's standard, which is what this look like here. So you can see everybody across the top and then just the screen. And what you'll want is side-by-side speaker. And what you can see is once you go into side-by-side speaker, there is a white bar to the left of the Dylan screen, and you can click on it and drag it to the left. And what that does is it makes, when we're sharing the app, so you can actually see the app interface, that's really large. And then you'll also be able to see Dylan actually demonstrating the different activities as we go through. So that is kind of the overall. And then just to summarize, again, there's the view menu in the top right. It should look something like this. Click on that, and I recommend you select side-by-side speaker and drag that bar all the way to the left. And so without further ado, I will send it over to Adam to discuss modes of exercise.
Hello, everyone. So we'll get going with just reviewing each mode. We have three modes. The first one is the timer activated stimulation mode. This one is just fairly straightforward. You have 2 seconds of stimulation and 3 seconds of rest. It starts with a 3-second countdown initially, and then you get that stimulation to whatever the targeted muscle is for 2 seconds after that. There's no current customization to this, but I think one of the things we can do to enhance this mode is to increase the stimulation time and the rest interval. And we're going to be going over all these modes as well in our first demonstration with Dylan. And that just about covers the timer activated. The takeaway for that is just 2 seconds of stimulation, 3 seconds rest. Very, very straightforward and consistent. So we'll go to the next one. And this would be the muscle activated. So the muscle activated stimulation mode is more a little more complex because it utilizes our EMG sensors to sense the muscle activity in the targeted muscle. So it's really good for initiating a contraction because it depends on initiation of your own ability to contract the muscle. And then it sends the stimulation to reinforce that pattern and make the contraction stronger. The useful part about this is that you can rest longer in between sets. So it's almost like a customizable rest period. So for example, if I'm using it for my quad, I fire my quad, and then I can rest 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then do another quad contraction and get that stimulation going. However, it can be a little inconsistent. And you have to have really good activation of that muscle. So if you have a good contraction ability in your quad, you would be able to fire it well. But if you didn't have good contraction ability in your quad, you might not be able to get that EMG to read as effectively. So yeah, and upcoming changes with this, the cool thing about it is you don't need to rely on a timer. So it is a bit more flexible. So hopefully in the future, we'll make those changes and not be so reliant on the timer, as it can confuse some people. And then our last mode here is the biofeedback. The biofeedback does not have any stimulation. but it does assist with watching a visual feedback, a visual representation of your muscle contraction. So it has a little bar that goes up and down when you contract the muscle. So it's really cool to see that because it helps develop what us exercise science folks call the mind-muscle connection. So that's one's mental ability to control muscle contractions. And it reinforces when someone is contracting a muscle. So it's really, really good to have like that biofeedback representation. Again, the con is there is no stimulation, but it's really, really good practice. And I think one of the cool changes that we can and have discussed with our product team is putting a percentage bar up there to measure, a 90% contraction, 80% contraction, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are the
Great.
three modes. What was that?
Great, Adam. One question, a question from the audience. Do you keep parameters on both as an ambulation mode? So I believe that will it save parameters?
Yes, we just talked about mentioning this. I get what you're saying. So I think she's asking, or he or she is asking, if the gait settings the same as the exercise settings. And the answer to that is no. When we do our exercise modes, they're not necessarily going to be the same. We want to see a big, strong contraction in the exercise modes. Think of like when you're strength training a muscle, the contraction is usually going to be stronger than in a strength training exercise versus when you're walking. So you want to see a visual motor level twitch when you're using your exercise modes.
Great. And there's another question that said that they hadn't seen a biofeedback mode. Do I need to update the program? It's possible that if you're not on the latest version of the app, that it wouldn't be visible. But everyone should be able to see biofeedback. If you don't, please contact support@cyonic.com.
Yeah, it should definitely be there.
Great.
Any
okay,
other
I think those are all the questions for now.
Awesome. Then we'll have Dylan take over for the calf raises. What we're going to do for this first exercise is go over all the modes in the calf raise. And yeah, so Dylan.
Yeah, and then Ann, are you gonna toss me up on the screen there?
Yep, 1 second. Let me swap to Dylan here. All right.
So let me get this positioned a little better so you can see my leg here. So we're gonna cover the calf raises first. In this section with calf raises, I'm going to demonstrate how all three of the exercise modes that Adam just covered works within just the calf raises. After that, just for the sake of time, we'll cover the rest of the exercises just in the timer activated stimulation mode, again, for simplicity's sake and for time. So when we're looking at calf raises, we're looking to strengthen the gastrocnemius. So I'll turn around here a little bit and you can see the gastroc is these. There's two heads. You have your lateral head, the one on the outside, and your medial head, the one on the inside. It's these two muscles that produce an action where your heel lifts and your toe points. So that's what we're looking to achieve with this exercise. The reason why it's beneficial is because we need push off for gait. So when I stand up, as I am stepping forward, my trail leg, I need to bring this leg forward. And so a heel raise or a calf raise is going to lift the heel up to propel that leg forward. So this contraction and training this action is what we want to do. I'll cover the modifications after I guess I can cover them right now. So the first one, so the most basic is you're going to be in a seated position. Somewhere around, a 90-degree angle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your foot can be out here. It can be bent a little more. There's really no right or wrong. It's what's best for you. So this would be, our most basic form. And then if we're going to look at a regression for if you're struggling, if it's a little bit challenging for you to produce that heel lift on your own, one of the things that we can do is what's called a long sit. So I would sit down here And then when I get the stimulation, I would just push my toes down. And essentially, this changes gravity's effect. So normally when I'm in a bent knee position, gravity is working against me to push my heel upward. In this position, gravity is actually in my favor. It's already like assisting a little bit with pushing my toes down. So it makes this action a little bit easier to produce. And then the progression, if you are finding that doing this in a seated position is easy, you can actually transition to a standing position, and then you can do standing version of these calf raises. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen here. It'll take a moment as I transition this over.
And Dylan, while you transition, maybe I can have Adam just answer a few questions as we get ready there. One question about the different exercise modes. So how exactly do the exercises work in the body and brain? How do they differ in the effect on the body?
Yeah, so what they're doing is the stimulation is enhancing the level of contraction. So to think of it, it's providing assistance in a movement pattern that should theoretically, like Dylan was talking about, it's going to transfer to assistance with walking. The calf raise, for example, is going to help with that push off, and it's the same movement is occurring. You're pushing down, that calf is contracting, going into plantar flexion, and strengthening that musculature should strengthen your ability to push off when you're walking. It's the whole idea behind it.
Great, thanks, Adam. And then just one note for everyone. So the screen settings that I was talking about earlier, this is when you'd want to make sure you adjust them. And so just to get the kind of optimal viewing experience, if you go to the view menu in the top right corner of the screen and you click on that, you'll want to go to the side-by-side speaker view. And then there's a bar, the white bar to the left of the screen with Dylan. If you just click and drag that over to the left, you'll be able to see the full screen as well as see all of the movements that Dylan's about to go through. So Dylan, over to you.
Perfect. So I've just switched over to my screen. What we're looking at is the home page for the Psionic app. For those that are new or haven't used the NeuroSleeve yet, if this is being sent to you after an onboarding, we always want to first make sure that your control unit is connected. So once you see up in the top that your control unit is connected and that battery percentage is displaying, that means that you're effectively connected and you're good to go. You will not have all of these gait assist modes. I get special treatment and I get to use all of them, but not everybody needs them. You're going to have your specific gait mode on this screen, and then down below is where we have the actual exercises. So you simply scroll down. You pick your selected exercise. Right now, we're going to start with calf raises. Once you tap on it, it's going to ask you to start. So we'll simply tap on it. And when you tap on start, it's going to ask you to calibrate, or not calibrate, but select your electrode configuration. What I typically do for most people with the calf is I select all 6. We want to have them on. However, please also know that this is for demonstration purposes. And if you've already been set up by your mobility specialist, you want to usually defer to what they have had you set up on. You may have a different configuration like this, or you may have a different configuration like this. Again, defer to what your specific mobility specialist had set up for you. From here, we have my intensity adjustment slider. Remember, it always stops us every 10 milliamps, and you have to tap on this lightning bolt to generate a stimulation. I'm going to increase until we see a little bit of movement out of my heel. It should look kind of like this. So I'm going to increase to 20 milliamps and tap the lightning bolt. I feel it more, but still no real contraction, but I feel that it's close. I typically favor 30 milliamps, so I should expect to see it here when I tap the lightning bolt. Yep, there we go. 30 milliamps feels about right for me. However, I can also do this if you produced a contraction and it felt like it was a strong contraction, but maybe a little too strong in the stimulation, I can test 25. I was at 30, and then I'm just going to bring it down to 25 and see if I still get some movement. See, and I still get a little one. So again, we just want to see some level of contraction. I think I'm going to prefer the 30, so I'll leave it there. But again, adjusting in accordance to your tolerance is ideal. So 30 right there works. I'm going to tap on the done button now. We'll start with the most basic. The first one is going to be timer activated stimulation up here in the top right corner. So I'm going to tap on that. It gives us various reps to select from. I'm going to select 10 repetitions. From here, this is what Adam had described earlier, where once I tap, there, you can see that arrow that's just to the right of the pause button. Once I tap on that arrow, it's going to initiate the exercise program, and it's going to start with a 3-second countdown timer. Right after that timer ends, it's going to go straight into 2 seconds of stimulation to my calf, where I will, on my own accord, to the best of my ability, lift my heel up and do a calf raise on my own in conjunction with the stimulation. That's what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to tap on that arrow here. It's going to give me my 3-second countdown, and then I get 2 seconds of stim to the calf and relax. And then 2 seconds of stim to the calf and relax. This is important. I'm going to tap the pause button here. Initially, it felt like a good contraction with the base stim, but that actually feels like it's a little too strong for me. So this is a good learning point. I was not as big of a fan of 30 milliamps once we were in the exercise mode. So I'm going to tap down here on the R calf button. If you're on the left leg, it'll say L calf. I'm going to bring this back down to 25. I think that's probably going to be a little bit better for me. It doesn't feel, it doesn't feel too strong. So we'll start there. And then I'm simply going to resume the stimulation. Just remember, you can always pause and resume stimulation as needed, and you can always adjust your settings as needed mid-exercise program. So I'm going to tap resume here. I'll feel this out. Yeah, and that is much, much better. I still get a contraction. It's sustaining, but it's not nearly as strong where I almost feel like I'm going to get kind of like a cramp or a Charlie horse. This is kind of the sweet spot for me. So I would leave this here and then just perform the rest of my 10 reps. However, for the sake of time, I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop. Once we stop, it's going to, anytime you make settings changes, it's always going to ask you if you want to save them. For me, I really, really like these settings, so I'm going to tap on the OK button to save them. In the future, if you ever make settings changes that you don't like, you can always tap the cancel button, and it's going to default, or it's going to bring you back to whatever your previous settings were. So if you made settings changes you didn't like, tapping cancel is probably the right thing to do. But again, I want to save these, so I'm going to tap OK. Then I'm going to tap start again. This is going to bring us back into the exercise mode selection screen. And with this one, I'm going to select muscle activated stimulation. No different. I'm going to, actually with this one, I'm probably going to select infinite, just so I can kind of demonstrate how it works. So we're going to tap infinite so I have enough time to explain things as I go about it. No different here. At this point, you don't need to worry about calibrating your stimulation. It should be set where it needs to. So if I tap on this R calf button down here, we can see that my previous settings are still there. So they have been successfully saved. This is what I like it at. So I'm going to tap done. And then I'm going to go back in. So I'm now going to initiate this protocol. What's different about muscle activated stimulation is what Adam said. The sleeve is going to be looking for muscle activity of this calf here. So it's looking for me to produce this motion on my own before it triggers the stimulation. So with muscle activated stimulation, when I tap that arrow, the first 3 repetitions I do will have no stimulation. The reason being is that is the sleeve gathering its perception of how you contract your muscle, and it's going to use the best contraction of the 3 that you performed to base, its triggering off of. So again, I'm going to tap the arrow next to the pause button to initiate those 3 reps. Once this timer ends, I'm going to lift and hold and relax. And again, these are unstimulated. Lift and hold and relax. And lift and hold and relax. Again, no stimulation. It's just gathering that data. Now, once I tap the arrow again, it's going to send me into the actual stimulation mode. The way this should work, and I want you guys to ignore the on-screen cadence. It's going to give you the 2 seconds of stimulation, the 3 seconds of relaxing. We don't have to follow that here. In theory, you can rest as long as you would like in between repetitions of this exercise. So I'm going to tap this go arrow, 3-second countdown, and I'm going to remain completely stationary. I'm getting no stimulation right now. And this is because the sleeve is not recognizing that I am performing any contraction of my calf. However, and this is whenever I, decide that I want to, whenever I contract my calf muscle, it will trigger the stimulation. So right now I'm going to lift my heel up on my own. Once I do, that stimulation is kicking in, and you can see that it actually helped push my heel up even a little higher than I'm used to. So I'm only going to do a bit of a half contraction here. It's going to give me stimulation. And then you can see at the end, it kind of lifts up a little higher because that stimulation kicks on to produce the action a little bit further. It's just a supplement. And again, we're doing this because you have to produce the action on your own. And then there's the reward of stimulation to increase the action. So again, I'm relaxing here, getting no stimulation. And then as I lift, I get stimulation and then relax. And again, that stimulation is only going to trigger for about 2 seconds, and then it should drop your heel back down. I'm going to pause the stimulation. I'm going to stop so we can exit. And I didn't make any settings adjustments there, so when I tapped on stop, it did not ask me to save because I didn't change anything. The last one here, I'm going to tap on start. And then we're going to use the bottom left one titled biofeedback. This one, I'm also going to select infinite. There's no stimulation here, so we don't have to worry about overstimulating. I'm going to tap on that. This one is completely unstimulated, and you're going to see why. So I'm just going to initiate this program, and I can relax. I don't have to worry about, stimulation coming in. At your own accord, when you're ready, you just lift and contract your calf. So performing the calf raise to the best of your ability, as strong as you can, for about 2 to 3 seconds. So now I want you to pay attention to the screen, my phone screen for the calf raises side as I do this. So I'm going to squeeze, and you can see that bar pops up on the right side. And then when I drop my heel down, the bar drops. So what we're getting is just an extrapolation of the EMG activity at the muscle. We're essentially seeing that this bar here is showing how strongly I'm contracting my muscle. And so it's really, really good for visual mind-muscle connection feedback. So the top of the bar, if I squeeze really hard, it goes up to the top. And if I do a little half contraction, it's only going to go about halfway. So the peak of that bar is displaying the strongest muscle contraction you've achieved in this session, and anything below the bar, below the top of the bar, is what's considered a percentage of that peak contraction. So your goal is going to be different depending on what you want to achieve. As Adam said, the goal is for us to implement a percentage tracker on this screen, so that way we can work within different intensities for certain rep ranges and training in different ways. So I can squeeze really hard and try to go for ones where I squeeze really hard and get to the top, or I can do less intensive reps and do more of them. So I can do half reps or 3/4 reps. And as I do this, I can do varying levels. I'm going to do a little contraction and then a little more, and then a little more, and I can really just kind of play around with and really hone in on how strongly I'm contracting my muscle and getting that really solid visual feedback as I perform it. So this is a highly valuable thing for you guys to do, and anything that we can have you do that does not involve stimulation first is always a good idea. Just because you have the stimulation available doesn't mean you need to use it. So using this mode so that way you can do unstimulated exercise first is always a good idea. With that being said, I'll pause stimulation. I will stop. And that's going to conclude the demo for calf raises, but also covering all 3 of those exercise modes. Again, from here on out, as we cover the other exercises, we're only going to be using timer activated stimulation for sake of time.
Great. Dylan, should I jump in with a few questions?
Yep, go for it.
Awesome. So there was one point early, which is a good point, which is that they observed that you're sitting on a soft sofa, which probably isn't ideal for this. Do you all just want to speak to just kind of what the ideal environment is for doing these exercises? I'm going to add Adam back into the discussion as well.
Yeah, a firmer surface would be more ideal, wouldn't you say, Dylan?
Yes, I just the only firm surface I have in my house right now is a really tall chair, so it just didn't work very well for this situation. However, if you do feel comfortable on a soft surface, there's nothing wrong with it. So remember, everybody is different, and so we don't want to dictate and tell you that using a soft surface to sit on is not okay. Find what works best for you that gives you the best results while you're doing these exercises. But yes, for most people in this situation, a firmer seat would be ideal.
Thanks. And then there's another question. Does it matter if you do both legs together versus one at a time?
So along with that, it's again the answer that nobody likes to hear, but it's dependent on what you like. What we do see though is some synergy that can happen. So if I sit here and I just perform this heel raise on my own, it might be really, really challenging, especially if it's my more affected leg. And so sometimes a lot of people will notice that as they throw in the other foot and they're using the heel raise on their less affected leg, it can help promote a synergistic action between it helps the other side. So it's not a bad idea to do both, but it's also, you're totally okay to do single leg as well.
Great. And then someone else observed that when they actually do standing calf raises, if they use both feet, it feels like the better leg or the stronger leg seems to compensate for the bad. So it sounds like someone else has wanted to share that experience as well. And then someone asked a question about settings in general. And the question was, is stronger better? Do you mind just speaking again to how to find the right settings? Does strength matter, or what are we looking for when we do our settings?
Yeah, Adam, I'll let you take that one.
All right. I think actually you touched on it pretty darn well there, Dylan, when you were turning it down. If you turn it up higher, you're likely to get a stronger contraction, which can sometimes be beneficial. You might get a fuller contraction, bigger range of motion, and more benefit. But Dylan mentioned when you had it turned up too high, you get that kind of cramping sensation. So you want to make sure it's comfort. Yeah, not ideal, right, Dylan? You want to make sure that it's not too high to where it's going to cause an excessive level of discomfort. But generally, moderate to higher would probably more beneficial, but just make sure it's comfortable and tolerable as well. There is going to be diminishing returns if you crank it up too high and the device is doing all the work for you as opposed to you initiating with your own level of contraction, which I think Dylan did a great job of touching on too. We don't always want the device to do it for us. It's just going to be a supplement. So probably moderate to high is where I would want it for most people, but not too high to where it's uncomfortable.
Yep.
Great. One more question. During setup, if you select inner and outer muscle groups, is the current split, it says hence reduced, or do both groups get the same energy levels? I think maybe talk about when you set up different muscle groups, how the signal gets
So
distributed.
are they referring to like something like this, or are they talking, I guess I
I
want
believe
to,
that that's correct. Yep.
so yeah, when we're looking at the actual electrode configuration screen, these colored squares here. So obviously these are just referencing the gel pads on my calf. Right now, I have all 6 of these turned on, so my 25 milliamps is dispersed across that whole gradient, all 6 of them. If I were to turn off these bottom 2, it's going to concentrate it. So when we're looking at comfortability and performance together, reducing the number of electrodes that I have turned on is going to be a higher level of stimulation at 25 than if I had it over 6. I use this analogy with a lot of people. I talk about like juice. So if you had a pitcher of juice and you were to add water to it, that's going to dilute the juice. It's going to be less concentrated. So you want to think of each one of these squares as a cup of water, and the stimulation, this 25 milliamps, is your juice. So as I remove, if I were to take 2 cups of just water away from the juice, it's going to be more concentrated. Like if it's lemon juice, it's going to be really, really sour. If I keep my juice at 25 milliamps and I add water, it's going to dramatically reduce the concentration, so it's not going to be as strong. I feel like it's a pretty easy analogy that kind of explains it better than if we were to dive into the technical side of things. So basically think same intensity. If I leave this at 30 and I take off 2 electrodes, that's stronger and more concentrated, and it's only going to be up here and not going to get these lower 2. And if I have all 6 on, it's going to dilute the stimulation, but it's going to send it over a larger surface area for potentially greater muscle contraction. So again, as always, deferring to your mobility specialist for what to use.
Great. A few more questions on this topic. So a few questions on spasticity. Can spasticity affect the muscle activated exercises? I get inconsistent results from the muscle activated, meaning getting stimulated when I'm trying to rest the muscle.
Yeah, it definitely can. For example, if you're having that spasticity response, the EMG will read that activity if it's in the targeted muscle, and it could possibly send a stimulation. It's the harder it is to relax, the more likely you're going to receive
Almost like
a stimulation.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so as a follow-up, another question, if someone has a lot of spasticity, which mode would you recommend for them?
Timer activated.
We're big fans of the timer activated stimulation.
Timer activated is awesome. Just
Great.
for the sake of consistency.
Great. Someone had a question. I received the anatomy coloring book by, is it Caput and Elson? I found it helpful for learning these leg parts. Do any of you like a particular anatomy guide?
I like
Anita,
that one.
I was gonna say I will ask Dr. Rebecca Webster. Okay, great. That's your favorite as well, Becky?
That is my favorite as well.
Great. Okay, and then one final question here. Let's see. I sit in a wheelchair all day and I wear the sleeve to exercise. Should I sit in a different chair?
Not necessarily. If you want to get out of your chair and sit somewhere else, you can, but doing it in a wheelchair, as long as you can as long as you can do these activities effectively, being in your wheelchair is not a bad place to be.
Great. And
Yeah, as
then
long as it
someone,
doesn't stop you. Sorry.
Exactly.
great. And then someone who was recently onboarded, I've had only one session so far and I only see the toe raises. Will I see more exercises as my mobility specialist recommends, or is there a way to see all exercises? Do you guys just want to speak to kind of how we introduce exercises during the onboarding process?
Yeah, if you want to go for it, Adam.
Yeah, they'll probably be added along. I don't know who your specialist is, but yeah, they'll be added along the whole onboarding follow-up process. Yeah, I don't usually I turn mine on for all my customers. So I'm sure that if you talk to them, they'll be able to switch them on for you. I'm
Yep.
not sure of your situation though. Each individual is different, but usually as we go, the more and more exercises will be added.
Great. All right. So in the interest of time, should we head to the next? We'll head to the next exercise.
Let's do it.
All right. Here we go.
All right, so I'll be doing just a brief description of the toe raises, and then Dylan will be hopping in and doing the modifications. So we're looking at the tibialis anterior. You can see in the picture there, the person is just sitting down, heels are in contact with the ground, and you're pulling your toes up. So this is the muscle that's going to be most responsible for improving that drop foot and that forefoot drag. And so we will go. Let's start with.
Well,
Did
yeah,
you want to
I'll
get?
I'll just demonstrate real quick. So again, calf
Yeah.
was push off, and then as Adam said, toe raises are right after we get heel off, and we want to bring that leg forward. Normally that foot might drag, so the dorsiflexion is going to pull those toes up so we can get some clearance. So instead of here, we get this.
And then if you could, Dylan, could you kind of show the area of where that is on your non-sleeve leg?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you. So what we're looking at, and this is a lot of people are familiar with this from when they get onboarded, where we discuss, finding the shin bone for placement. So your tibia, your shin bone is mine's right here, and then this is my left side. So if I scoop my fingers over to the left side of that bone, I can feel a little crevice, and in that crevice is a muscle. That muscle is the tibialis anterior. And hopefully you can, yeah, there we go. You can kind of see it pop out as I lift my toes up. That's this muscle right here that's lifting my toes up. So that's what we're looking at. Basic, the normal way to start it is again sitting in your desired seat, and then again somewhere around a 90-degree angle is okay to start, or we can have our foot out in front of us to make the action a little bit easier. But again, we're just looking at lifting the toes up. And then the regression would be sitting down. And again, that takes some of gravity out of the equation, and we can just lift here a little bit easier. So that's an easier regression. And then it's going to be hard for me to demo this. I'll probably have to angle my camera up, but a step up. And so if I angle my camera up here, as I lift my leg, I'm trying to get my toes up. So essentially thinking if you had some kind of object in front of you, like your stairs, you could step up onto stairs, and using the toe raises exercise to get a little bit of hip flexion and knee flexion in, if you have the ability to, is useful. So instead of going up and having my foot hanging there when I step onto a step, I can lift and have my toes lift upward as I plant my foot down onto that step. Set this back here.
I think it's
Great,
good
and
to
there's
point out that when you're doing that hip flexion with the toe raises, it kind of reinforces that gait pattern. So it's a very specific exercise to walking, being able to pull your knee up and pull your toes up and just reinforce that pattern. So very useful if you're able to do that.
Yep. And then I'm just going to cover very basically here the toe raises exercise. So for everybody, it's going to be the very bottom one. I'm going to tap on toe raises. As always, I tap start. Now, this is where it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. Most people, when I set them up, I select the 3 that are most medial. It's the ones that are closest to that white dashed line on the inside of the sleeve. Reason being is because that covers the most surface area of that tibialis anterior muscle, the one that I showed earlier that is involved with lifting your foot up. There's going to be individual variation with all of you. Some people might have these 4 squares turned on to help with some eversion. We might have just these 3 in the corner. We might have all 3 on the medial side, the side closest to the line, and then this top one or this middle one. There's so many variations. I don't want you guys to think too hard about it. Remember, with these, it is always referring or deferring to your specific mobility specialist so they can help you get it set the right way so that way you get the most neutral foot lift. With that being said, this one works best for me. And then I'm going to take my slider, increase it 10 milliamps at a time. And I'm going to continue to increase. You can see I got just a little tiny bit of toe movement there. For some people, that may be enough. Others, if you want to get a little bit more motion, I'm going to slide my foot out here and test 30. You can see that produces a pretty good result. Now, I don't know if this is going to be too strong like it was last time for my calf. So I'm actually going to err on the side of caution here and bring it down a little bit. Again, just to avoid the potential for that cramping sensation that I don't really particularly enjoy. So I'm going to test 25. That's still enough to lift my toes, but it's not strong enough to make me feel like it's going to be too much. I'll tap the done button here. And then again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to use the timer activated, show a couple reps here by tapping on the 10 reps, and then I will start it by tapping that arrow to the right of the pause button. 3 seconds countdown, and then I get 2 seconds of stimulation to the toes. This to me feels perfect. It's just enough, and right now I'm going to be completely relaxed. That's the whole sleeve. I'm not doing anything. Then once the sleeve triggers that stimulation, I can lift with it and I can get higher. So I just wanted to make sure you could see what the sleeve is doing on its own and then what I can do to further increase that drive. I can lift it even higher if I want. So that's how this mode functions. I'll pause, stop, and then I like those settings, so I'm going to save them by tapping OK. And then we can transition, or I guess if people have questions about toe raises, this is where we'd want them.
Yes, there was one actually point of feedback, which is toe raises. Is it important to sit all the way back in the chair? If so, if you're shorter, should you put a blanket or box to enable that?
I'm gonna let you answer that one.
I think it's more important that the foot position in relation to the knee. So go ahead and pull your foot back there, Dylan, like as far back, and then watch him try and go forward a little bit more. Sorry, yeah, you got good range here.
Yeah, so first off, if you're back here, I can do that action, but you're not going to get the actual motion that we're looking for.
Exactly. So then if we push it forward a little bit, like in front of the knee, and then you can see he's going to have much better range of motion. And you can push it further forward than that too. However, you're going to have more resistance because there's going to be more weight on that heel. So,
so the sweet spot.
Exactly.
Can I jump in too?
Yeah,
go for it.
So I think the question is also about being short. And I think that was the question. If someone is, when they sit back in their chair, or like supported in their chair and their feet don't touch the ground.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. So like,
yeah.
If I hang my foot here, almost like, so this is just me completely relaxing my foot. So this would, demonstrate their foot hanging off. Is that what you're kind of referring to?
Yeah, well, I was going to say they could put a box or something under the foot too, so that they are supported. So I think the question, instead of moving forward in the chair in order for the feet to touch on the ground, you could do that if you feel safe. But again, sitting in a supported seat, if you feel more comfortable sitting back supported, it's okay to put something, a box or something under the feet to make sure that they are on a level surface.
Right. Yeah. Being on a level surface is ideal.
Yeah.
Great. And then a few more questions. When I do toe raises, my foot turns out. There's another question. If the toe turns in when it lifts, which way do we need to adjust the sleeve? So do you mind just addressing some modifications that you can make if you either experience eversion or inversion?
Yep. So if you guys haven't watched my dorsiflexion video that I did with Becky, you guys should refer to that. It's a great piece of content. Just going to plug that. So again, what we're looking at is the tibialis anterior muscle, this one right here. Right next to it, you've got your peroneals. These are the muscles that help with turning your foot out and getting like more of that pinky toe side to lift up. So if you're finding that when that stimulation goes through, so if we're looking at my screen, I've got those three turned on. These are the ones right next to my shin bone. Anatomy is going to kind of dictate this a lot. And so depending on how your muscle attaches, you may be somebody that's more prone to inversion, where your big toe side lifts a lot and then your pinky toe side stays down or does not lift as much as you would like. So what I think is best, and it may be different per mobility specialist, but I like to make a shift of the sleeve. So if my pinky toe side was to stay down and my big toe side was to stay up, this is inversion or supination. Obviously, we're more prone to rolling our ankle here. My first thought is to unstrap the whole sleeve. So take off the Velcro, peel it off of my leg. And then I'm going to take these gel pads and shift them a little bit further away from the shin bone, because they're going to start to touch. We have the tibialis anterior, but they're going to start to touch those peroneals that are right next to it. And so those peroneal muscles, if I were to only stimulate them, my foot would do this. It's just going to lift my pinky toe side up. And so when we shift it a little bit and that the gel pads are kind of touching the tibialis anterior that lifts your foot up, and it's kind of touching the muscles that lift your toes up, or your pinky side toes up, we should see that instead of getting that inversion, that we get more of a neutral lift. So this would be purely stimulating tibialis anterior if you're prone to inversion. And then if I add some stimulation to those peroneals, it should start to get those pinky toes up a little bit. Let me get out of this.
Great. And then just let's take one more question on this topic, and then we'll continue to move along because I want to be sensitive to time. So does the toe raise help when coming downstairs? I find going downstairs is harder because of the tendency to drag my toe. So is this movement going to help with stairs?
I guess in theory, yes. If you struggle with dragging your toes across the floor while stepping down, it could. Adam?
Yeah, I could see it being useful as like a step down exercise. Like you were doing the step up version, it is important to, it potentially can help going down as well. Specifically if you're dragging the toes, yeah.
Great. And then there's actually one final question, which is someone says that shoes can be really heavy. It feels like a weight on the foot. Is it better to be barefoot to start, or do we have a recommendation on footwear?
Barefoot, good. I like barefoot.
Yeah, especially if the shoes are too heavy, think of it as like
Let those toes out.
think of it as a target, start with barefoot, do that for a couple weeks, and then put the shoes back on, see if you can do them with the shoes on at a future moment in time.
Yeah,
So
and this will be a plug for week 3. Adam and I are going to be discussing, programming exercise, progression of exercise. That would be something that would be considered a progression of exercise, starting with no shoe, because it adds some bulk, adds some weight. And then if you get good at doing a toe raise with just your barefoot, you can throw a shoe on to make it a little bit more challenging and increase, the amount of work that's required to strengthen that muscle.
Great. All right, let's head to knee extension.
All right, just a simple knee extension exercise here, focusing on the muscle right above the knee on the front of your thigh. Helps kick, yeah, exactly. It helps kick the foot out when we're walking, so getting that full extension of our stride. Yep. And then also if you have weak quads, you need to have good, strong quads in order to prevent buckling when the weight is down on it. So this is a good exercise in general to strengthen. It's going to provide a lot of stability. And yeah, there's multiple ways to do this exercise. So without further ado, here's Dylan with the modifications.
Okay, I'm just switching my phone over. So quad sets. Some of you may be familiar with these if you've been in physical therapy. A quad set is very basic. It's just sitting in a position like this, the long sit position, and then you're just flexing your quad. So right now my leg is completely relaxed, and then if you watch it here, I'm just contracting that muscle. That's a quad set. So that would be a really easy kind of remediation of that. Something like the SAQ, that stands for short arc quad. I would be on a harder surface, so that way I'm not on a squishy surface that's not easy to balance on. But I would take something like a pillow and put it under my leg, and then that way my legs my foot's not pressed into the floor. It's just kind of gently hanging above, and then I can get more of an action here where my foot, I don't have to worry about my toes I don't have to lift up to get my toes off to it so I can extend my knee. That would be a little bit easier version. And then we've got squats and step ups. So these would be what are considered progressions. So a mini squat is me standing here. And then I'm standing, I have some base of support for myself if I need it, and then just dropping down, and the action of coming up right here. When you see my knee is bent and I start to come back up and the knee pushes back more, that is what my quad is doing. It is producing this action. So mini squat, just like this. In a step up, if I were to plant my foot onto something, and then as I am standing up, this leg right here is extending to help me stand. And I'm not in a super great position to demonstrate that, but think of like going up a set of stairs. Once you plant your foot onto the step and you are bringing yourself up over the step, that would be using your quad to extend your knee to stand up. And then I'm going to share my screen here, and then I'll do a very basic demonstration of using the knee extension exercise mode in the Psionic app.
Great. And Dylan, while we're waiting for you to share, I'll ask a question of Adam. So someone asked, for my gait setting, I have the 3 electrodes closest to the shin bone selected, but for my exercises, all 6 are selected. Should these be the same, or is this okay?
It should be okay as long as you're still getting I assume that's in the toe raise exercise. I think I saw that one earlier. It should be okay as long as you're still getting the desired toe raise. However, if you wanted to, you could always turn off those 3 and have it match what's in your gait program as well. Just do whatever is going to give you the best toe raise result. Maybe they wanted a little more eversion, and that's why it's set up that way. That would be the only thing I could think of. Yeah, so it's not a problem as long as you're getting that same toe raise.
Great, thanks. All right, Dylan, over to you.
Okay. As before, it's very straightforward. I accessed the knee extension mode, and then I'm tapping start. For me and 99.9% of the people I set up, I'm going to turn all 6 of these on to cover the most surface area. Remember, defer to your mobility specialist if they've set you up this way. That's okay. Whatever they think is best for you. I'm going to increase my stimulation until I feel a contraction in my quad here, so the top of my leg. So I'm going to tap the lightning bolt and continue to increase. So 20 feels like it's starting to get there, but it's not quite. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can see that. So my quad is starting to contract a little bit there. That's for me probably about where I want it. It doesn't feel too strong. This is something that's important to take note of when it comes to the knee extension exercise. We've talked a lot about using the neural sleeve as a training tool, not something that produces the action for you. In this situation, you're not going to find that the neural sleeve is going to produce this really big knee extension activation. It's not going to kick your leg out with great force. You're going to find it's going to help assist with it, but we want you to produce as much of the action as you can. So I'm going to leave it at 30 here because that's my comfort level. And then again, for the sake of time, timer activated stimulation, 10 reps. Once I tap that arrow next to the pause button, we get a 3-second countdown. And once that countdown ends, it gives me 2 seconds of stim. And from here, I'm feeling the stimulation and trying to extend and then let it relax. I'm going to drop this down here so you guys can see, because you're going to see in the depiction of the woman moving that her foot drops right back down to this 90-degree angle. We don't have to have that happen. If you extend, so when you extend your leg out, you can just let your leg drop and let your foot relax wherever it touches. You don't have to have it come right back to that 90-degree position. Remember, we're performing this to the best of your ability. So if you find that it makes it exceptionally challenging to bring your foot all the way back and you don't want to have to deal with that extra challenge, just let your foot drop wherever it does, and then you can extend and drop. Any range of motion is good as long as you're working it yourself as well on top of the stimulation. And so that would conclude that section. So there's not like those settings, so I'm saving them by tapping OK.
Great. A couple of just quick questions. What if I don't have any movement in my foot or ankle unless I have the sleeve on?
Yeah, so in that situation, that's where you would want to use the neural sleeve to assist. If you get stimulation to those muscles from the neural sleeve and then it helps you produce those actions, that's great. This is a very underutilized idea of training, mental repetitions. So if you can get a little bit of movement out of your foot with stimulation from the sleeve, and then you can actively visualize and try to produce the action, even if I'm sitting here thinking about and I'm trying to do this toe raise, and if I can't, just thinking about it is doing something. And then if we throw in stimulation to also produce a contraction, it's going to be that much more beneficial. So I hope that answered that question. Adam or Becky, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, well said.
Great. And then let's just do 2 more short questions before we move on. So the first one is, I think Dylan, referencing back to your mini squats, what about wall sits? What are our thoughts on wall sits as another way to optimize?
Adam, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, they're a great static exercise to strengthen your quads. However, there won't be a program for that via the neural sleeve. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do them if they're within your program. I think they're a good exercise for just developing good static strength in the quads.
I'm going to jump in too. Can I jump in too quick?
Sure.
Yeah. So if wall sits are generally static, like Adam said, you're just kind of holding a wall sit. That being said, you could do a mini squat with using the wall for support. So as Dylan demonstrated, a mini squat kind of freely in the air there. If you want to use a wall for support and balance and do a mini squat sort of against the wall, instead of holding it statically, you could use the knee extension quad stimulation for that.
Right. So make sure you have a slick shirt on though, that slides.
Yeah. Friction's going to be rough.
Yeah.
One more question.
Most likely you're going in a very kind of a tiny range of motion, right? Like you're not coming way down and trying to come way back up.
Great. When you do a step up on the bottom step, should you lean forward?
I say yes.
Great. Great. And then last question, do the quad exercises help with knee hyperextension?
Adam, if you want to go on that one.
So they can, because I feel like when an individual tends to hyperextend, they're looking for support. So they're locking out the knee, which is the quad that extends and can overextend that knee. However, if you have strong quads, it can and you can work and practice at not extending it out all the way, you can support your body weight with the strength of your quads as opposed to relying on the structures of just the knee. Dylan, can you do a little demo for me?
Yeah.
So like
you want me to stand?
yeah, I want you to stand up and like just get your knee in shot there. So if you have weak quads, your knees are going to slowly start to buckle. So go ahead, Dylan, start to like flex, go into knee flexion. Like, yeah,
Okay.
I see this with some of my customers. They kind of, and they're
Yeah, so
using their
look,
hand. Exactly. And so what we do in that regard is we'll lock that knee out. So kind of just don't hurt yourself. And that provides your support now because now his knees aren't buckling. And now if he has good trust, yeah, exactly. Well, that was a good one. And now if he trusts his quad here, he doesn't have to overextend his knee. So he can stand with a slight bend in his knee. So having faith in the strength of your quads can assist with that. But another aspect is going to be the hamstring, where being able to flex the knee and keeping it from overextending to have good balance with the quad is going to help with that as well. So basically, you want to have strong hamstrings and quads to kind of have a good balance around that knee joint. I know it's a lot, but it's a pretty complex issue that we see often. Anything you want to add to that, Becky or Dylan?
I would just say that if you're finding that the knee extension exercise is driving you into hyperextension, we don't want that. So that's something to avoid. But again, in this situation, if I can extend my leg and we can see that I am not hyperextended, I still have an angle at the knee here. This is good. That's kind of referring to what Adam was talking about, where when I'm walking, I want to be able to experience that quad contraction and rely on it for the stability so my leg doesn't buckle or hyperextend behind me. Because if I'm standing here, I'm going to take all my weight off of this leg. My quad is completely relaxed now. Without me even thinking about it, my body does it. Once I plant weight here, my quad is now contracted. I'm not doing it. It just happens to keep myself supported. So the buckle happens when we have low quad tone. It's just going to shoot the knee back. And then it's also the same way if you see that big dip when someone's walking. It's the quad not necessarily turning on. So we want to have strength in a range of motion where your knee is not dropping down and your knee is not locking back. So maintaining quad strength with a slight bend in the knee is ideal.
And then Dylan, what if we have no straight, only bent knee or hyperextension?
What do you mean if we have no straight?
If it sounds like it basically the individual goes between having a bent knee and then going straight into hyperextension.
Oh, okay. I mean, we can utilize this exercise mode to do that. So I would imagine that the person would be hard pressed to do this exercise and be able to get into knee hyperextension this way. Most people do. So finding a way to do this exercise where you can get some extension of the knee, but you're not hyperextending it is ideal. And then also using the walking mode and making sure that you're not hyperextending your knee is ideal as well. But that's a different story that we can discuss later.
Great. All right, let's go to knee flexion.
All right, so this one's this is the hamstring exercise, usually one of the hardest ones for a lot of our customers. And this is how you bend your knee, just how you can see in that top picture there of that model. And it's going to allow for some stability, as we talked about, when your foot is on the ground as well. Very, very important for initial foot clearance. And if we can get a demonstration of that there, Dylan.
Are we doing the standing one?
Yeah, let's start just a demonstration of like when you walk, like where that knee flexion comes in handy.
So we discussed earlier, calf stimulation is going to help with push off. Toe stimulation is going to help with getting clearance from the floor. In the walking mode, when you're using stimulation from the sleeve, if you have hamstring stimulation, it's going to time very synchronously with the toe lift. So right after we get the calf lifting off, it's going to trigger hamstring stimulation to get the knee to bend. And you can see that if my knee doesn't bend, I can drag my foot across the floor. But if I get some knee bend, I can bring my leg through. So that's the idea behind it. This is hamstring contraction. This is hamstring no contraction. So you can see the difference in being able to clear the floor with having that. Is that what you were looking for?
Exactly. Yeah. So we understand that and walking with a straight leg is really hard for foot clearance. So this is a good exercise to start developing that ability to bend the knee. Either standing is going to be harder, but you can do that seated one as well. And yeah, are you going to demonstrate the prone, Dylan?
Yep, so I can do that. Let's see if I can do that here. So prone, this is, sorry, I'll do the regression. So the challenging one is going to be the standing one. I'm sure a lot of people that struggle with, using their hamstrings, they know that one where they're standing and bending their knee is challenging. Our kind of base one is going to be the lower picture where we can see our lovely psionic representative Jen. She is having her foot out in front of her. And again, people who are familiar with physical therapy, she's performing a heel slide. So with that, your foot starts out in front of you. When you get stimulation to the hamstrings, it's contracting to get your knee to bend. So your goal would be, as stimulation hits and the hamstrings, to pull your foot back with it to the best of your ability. Now remember, in the video that you see when you're doing these exercises, it's going to show the person getting into like a 90-degree bent position. You do not have to get there. Even if you're out here and you get this much bend, that's good. Something is better than nothing. Or if your foot doesn't move at all, but you can see that there's an initiation of the motion, again, something is always better than nothing. And then when we're looking at the prone, this one would be probably one of the more difficult ones. You're out here in front, you've got gravity pushing down on your leg, and you're lifting up this way. And I can feel my hamstrings work quite a bit when I'm performing this action. So for some of you, if you do this, you might find that you can only do this much. And that's okay. Again, something is better than nothing. And then you're working on going from being able to do this to being able to do that, being able to do that, and just working on trying to get more and more range of motion. And then I'm going to share my screen here.
And while you're getting that set up, there's a question: when doing hamstring exercises, how do you avoid having the hamstrings cramp?
I covered this briefly when I was talking about my calf stimulation. So if your stimulation is too strong, you're going to get that cramping sensation. So you want to decrease stimulation. However, I do understand that in certain regards, you can also, just by producing a hamstring contraction, you can also get that cramping sensation. So Adam, if you wanted to talk about any of that, or Becky, she might be able to talk about some anatomical stuff related to that.
What do you got for Becky?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so to their point, definitely turn down the intensity of stimulation. The higher up, the more likely the leg is to cramp. You could try also adjusting whether the gel pads or the electrodes, potentially moving them more medial or lateral, depending on how your sleeve is fitting. You may want to kind of steer the current one way or the other.
I'll show that. So she's talking about, if my hamstrings are here, I would unstrap the sleeve from the Velcro, peel the gel pads off, and then if I shift the sleeve this way, my gel pads are going to touch more of the outside of my hamstrings, or if I shift it this way, they're going to touch more of the inside of my hamstrings.
You can also do it in the app too. If you just want to, if you don't want to adjust your sleeve, you could just reduce the percentage or even turn off, yeah, the medial or lateral. If you're feeling like one, so like in the calf, oftentimes the medial calf or the inner part of the calf is the head that is cramping. So similarly in the hamstring, it may be,
Medial head of the calf right here. This one.
yeah. So if you're getting a calf cramp on that inner side, you could just turn the inner ones off. Similar in the hamstring, if you're starting to feel that the cramp is more inner or outer, you could turn off or turn down the electrodes in the app as well.
Okay. And are there any other things we want to cover, or can I go to the demo?
Nope, I think we're ready for the demo.
Okay, so I'm going to demo the seated hamstring exercise quickly. So I've tapped on seated hamstring. I tap start. I like to have all of them turned on. You may find that your mobility specialist has set you up this way or this way. There's no right or wrong. If they have given you that setting, that is okay. I'm going to increase my stimulation. And again, we're looking for me to get some level of contraction down here. That's not painful. So I'm starting to feel it quite a bit more at 20. I'm sure my body tends to kind of favor 30 milliamps. See, and that, that actually almost caused my heel to lift up. So that's a good contraction. I can feel that. You can see it there. I'm going to tap on done. Timer activated for the sake of time, 10 reps. Now, this one's a little bit different. So when I tap the go arrow, the first thing, instead of immediately triggering a contraction, is it's actually going to ask me to slide my foot forward. It's expecting a lot of you to start here. So when I tap this arrow, once this countdown timer ends, it's going to say slide your foot forward. Then return, and that's when I want to pull back with the hamstring stimulation, and then slide my foot forward again, and return it back, and then slide it forward, and return it back. And that's all this is working on. This is very important. Depending on what surface you're on, it can make this exercise a heck of a lot easier or a heck of a lot harder. Right now, I am socks on a kind of like a fabric-y carpet. That's not ideal. That's going to give me more friction, so it's going to make it harder to pull my foot back. Not the greatest example, but if I used something like a book here, this is going to slide a little bit easier across the carpet than my sock will, because it doesn't have that same kind of friction. And so I'd be able to put my foot on this, or like a piece of cardboard or plastic. Some people have these sliders that you can purchase. So if you're on carpet, either cardboard or plastic is ideal to make that exercise a little bit easier to slide. And then if you're on a tile or stone laminate surface, socks, if you're just barefoot, or if you've got a shoe on, having a towel of some sort underneath your foot is going to make that a lot easier, less friction. I'm going to stop this exercise, and then I'll just quickly demo the actual standing knee flexion. So I'll stand up for this. I'm going to tap start. I would obviously want to be holding on to something for support. If I had, I might as well just do it. I'm going to get my chair over here so that way I can hold on to this for support. So you can see my hands are resting on this. Again, no different. I'm going to select my intensity, probably going to be around 30 or so. You can see right there, I'm kind of unweighted on this sleeve leg here. So I don't have any weight on it. It's all on my left leg right now. And when I tap the lightning bolt, you can see my knee really wants to push forward, and that's the hamstring contracting to bend my knee. That feels appropriate to me. I will tap the done button. Timer activated stimulation, 10 reps. Once I tap the go arrow, I get a 3-second countdown. When that stimulation kicks, I'm trying to bend my knee as much as I can and then relax. Bend my knee and relax. Bend my knee and relax. A quick tip for you guys. I see this a lot when I work with certain people. a lot of people will favor, if they're doing this exercise, they'll favor a big arch in the back. When they're trying to lift, they'll arch their back really, really heavily to try and produce the motion. So something that's good to think about is trying to not lean and push your chest forward, but to try to keep yourself back on the heel of your foot that's planted on the floor. And that usually helps. And again, even if you get just the littlest bit of motion, that's better than you getting a lot of motion, but doing this big compensatory action by pushing your whole upper body forward. And it puts a lot of stress on your lumbar spine. It can cause pain there, so we want to avoid that. And that's going to finish that demo. So if there's any questions, we can go for it.
Great. No, just two suggestions from the viewers. One person said that they use a frisbee for the seated hamstring exercises.
Ooh,
And another says they use a nubby ball on carpet.
A nubby ball? Oh, is that like something that you'd roll your foot out on?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah, or a baseball or a lacrosse ball. Actually, here, I can do that real quick. So, lacrosse ball, always keep one handy, everybody, it's good for you. Oh yeah, I mean, you might struggle with keeping your foot balanced on that. So if you don't have an issue with keeping your foot balanced on the ball, this does feel very good, very smooth, very easy motion. Something that might help, instead of a rolly ball, it's deodorant. That's a little rolly one. This one, I don't have to worry about my foot sliding off because it's not a rounded it's not a sphere, it's a cylinder. And so my foot can just rest comfortably across it and roll. So whoever had that suggestion, that was a great idea.
Great. And then just one last question on this topic. It sounds like sliding back seems similar to pulling up on the backside of bike pedaling. Do you just want to speak to kind of the muscles that are used?
Sorry, sliding back. Oh,
yeah, like this. Yeah,
I got you.
This exercise. Yep.
So when we're looking at being on a bicycle, when you're pedaling, so I guess I can demonstrate it this way. So if I'm pedaling on a bike, so you can see right here, so if I'm pushing forward, I'm using my quad to extend out. And then as I cycle down and I want to bring my foot back up on the back side of the revolution, as I'm coming back around, this action right here, bringing the pedal back before I go back up again, is the same as that heel slide that I was just doing, if that makes sense. Right there is a heel slide. Right there is a heel slide. Right there is a heel slide.
Thanks, Dylan. All right, let's head to eversion.
All right, so the eversion exercise is a very small movement that occurs at the ankle where your foot is kind of going out to the side. It's the opposite of inversion. Inversion, you tend to walk on the outer edge of your foot. Eversion, it's going to push the foot to the outside at the ankle joint, not the knee or the hip. This occurs all at the ankle joint. Yep, exactly. And very, very small. This is the peroneal muscle group that Dylan talked about, which is going to be more on the side, just next to the TA.
Yeah, TA is right here. And then peroneals are like right next to it, right there.
And if you've ever rolled an ankle and went to PT, you're probably doing this exercise a ton. I know I did back in my playing days. So let's check out some modifications.
Yep. So long sit. I think you guys are probably pretty familiar with this by now. So I guess it might be better if I show it this way. So I'm sitting out, long sitting here. And so this is just eversion. I'm just turning my foot out to the side. There's not much lift happening. This is me pulling my toes towards me. This, I'm doing that. Almost kind of like I'm a puppeteer. So that would be a regression. It makes it a little bit easier. The thing that's going to be a progression is, again, this is going to be great for those who struggle with inversion, where your foot, your big toe side lifts up and your pinky toe side doesn't lift up. When walking, is going to be doing dorsiflexion, so lifting up with the eversion. So I can lift, this is pure dorsiflexion, but while I lift, I can also turn my toes out. And then you would just kind of combine the two. So instead of up and out, I can do up and out together. And this is going to be preventative for ankle rolling. And then I can very quickly demonstrate the exercise. Should be up on the screen here right now. Oh, just stop sharing. If there's questions.
Yeah, while you get that set up, someone asked if we have an exercise for inversion.
Kind of.
No, do we? I've only had a handful of people who over evert, so I don't think so. But what are you thinking, Dylan?
So the way I'll say this is, let me get this pulled up. So certain people are going to find that if they were to take their sleeve, this is not necessarily ideal, but if we're looking at the shin bone, remember we typically want the gel pads to be off to the side of the shin bone. A lot of times stimulation over the bone can cause like a sharp or a needly sensation. It's not very comfortable. But there are certain people that I've worked with where if they get tons of eversion where their foot does this, the closer they get it to the shin bone or even slightly over, can promote some level of inversion. It's not guaranteed, but it has the ability to produce it in some people. Right, we're going to leave knee flexion and then eversion. Very simple here. It's going to depend on the person. I'm going to have some good tips here to pay attention to. So when it comes to dorsiflexion, when we want the toes to lift up, we want these three over here. That's going to promote lifting the toes up. This side, the lateral side, the side that's further away from the white dashed line, this is going to promote that eversion where your foot lifts up out to the side. With this, sometimes these gel pads, they can touch the plantar flexors, the muscles that lift your heel up. So there are some people that may find that if you have all three of these turned on, you might get some eversion, but you also might get eversion and plantar flexion where your toes point down. So if you're finding that you get plantar flexion, that means that they're too far to the outside and you might just need to adjust the sleeve a little bit further inward. So that way you don't have to worry about plantar flexion and you can get just the eversion where your toes lift up. Further, sometimes this very bottom one can be a problem. Just that bottom one there can be, because as your muscle tapers down, it might get closer. That very bottom one might get close to touching the muscles that push your toes down. And so sometimes just turning that bottom one off can help. So just a couple of kind of hot tips there if you wanted to pay attention to it. From here, I'm going to build up my intensity. I'm already getting some movement, but it's not enough. When I tap on this, whoa, that's too much, way, way too much. I'm going to bring it back down to 25. That's a little bit better. Yeah, that's what I want to see. Okay. Timer activated stimulation, 10 reps. Tap the go arrow. Yep, and that's purely just lifting the outside of my foot up. My pinky toe side is being lifted. I'm not getting plantar flexion. My toes don't want to push down, so I'm in a good spot. This would be for those who have the ability to do some level of dorsiflexion on their own. This is where you can increase the challenge. And when the stimulation kicks in to lift the pinky toe side up, I'm going to try and lift my toes up with that. And it wants to pull my pinky toe side up as I lift my toes up. So that's the harder variation, if you will. And that's going to conclude that demo.
Great. And then, so we just have 2 exercises left, but I want to be sensitive. I know we've gone a little bit over, and thanks for everybody's questions. And so maybe we can go through these last 2 fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so why don't we jump into rockers?
So the rocker exercise is kind of going to mimic when we go from a plantar flex position, so that position of pushing off using our calf muscle, into dorsiflexion, so that transition period right here. So it's more of a movement-based exercise as opposed to just focusing on one muscle group. It focuses on the calf and the dorsiflexors, the TA.
Yep. I'm gonna everybody's familiar with it now, the long sit. So this would be, it's gonna plantar flex me. Here, I'll shift my camera just a little bit. It's gonna plantar flex me and then dorsiflex me. So it's gonna start with plantar flexion. It's gonna push my toes down for the first start of the exercise, and then it's gonna lift my toes up after, and then rest. Toes point, toes pull, rest. And that's how the exercise is gonna work. We don't necessarily have much of a progression to this. And so this is, purely, as Adam said, just it's kind of training to give you the transition from pushing off to getting your toes to lift up. So I'll demo this very, very quickly.
Great. And while you're getting the screen up, there's a question: in the supine position, is there a way to compensate for hip external rotation?
By internally rotating your hip is the only thing I could think of.
You can try using a loop band to go above the knees or holding them with your hands to kind of compensate for that. But if you were able to work on that internal rotation, like Dylan said, that would be the most ideal.
Yeah, so you can think of it this way. So external rotation is when your foot and your whole leg wants to roll out. So if I control this myself, I can roll my leg in. So active control is always going to be better, but you can get passive. I've seen people do this. My leg's completely relaxed right now, and I can push myself, I can pull myself into hip internal rotation. So active is always better, but passive, if it's desired, if you feel like you need it, you can also do that. Or if, as Adam said, using some kind of strap as well. So for rockers, I'm going to tap on start. It's going to ask me to do dorsiflexion first. So for me, I like these 3. Please use whatever your mobility specialist has set for you. And then I like 30 is perfect. For my calf, I remember 30 was too much, so I'm going to keep it at 25. Yep, that's enough, but not too much. So no different here. Timer activated stimulation, 10 reps. Tap the go arrow. When I do 3-second countdown timer, it's going to do heel raise first, or calf raise first, immediately into toe raise. So it's going to be here and then here, then relax. Tapping the go arrow, 3, 2, 1, heel raise. Ooh, and see, that's actually even too much right now for my calf. I'm going to bring that down even more. That's better. This is also important for people to know. Depending on the day, everybody has good days, bad days, in between days. You may find that on any given day and on any given different point in the same day, you might need a different level of stimulation. So, you're going to have some base settings, if you will, but don't get super attached and think like, oh, this is what my mobility specialist set for me. It has to stay this way. Remember that you guys are autonomous. You guys have full control over this, and use your best judgment. If you feel like something's too strong, lower it. If you feel like something's not strong enough, increase it. Only you know what you're feeling. And so it's never a bad idea to make an adjustment that makes things more comfortable and more effective for you. So with that being said, I made an adjustment to lower my calf stimulation. We're going to test it now by resuming. So I'll get calf stimulation, much better, and relax. This is where I want it to be. Calf stimulation is now completely tolerable. It still helps. Toe or shin stimulation is perfect. I couldn't have said it any better. Hats off to me. There we go. Basic right there. Stop. I'm going to tap OK to save. And then if there's, or no, we're going to go straight into swing, correct?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, let me just demo this so we don't have to do the transition stuff, and then Adam can explain it. So if he wants to. So when we're looking at swing, swing is looking at extending the quad, or sorry, extending your knee with quad stimulation and pulling your toes up together. So there's some people that kind of have that the plantar flexion tone where if they extend, their toes want to point. So whenever they extend their leg, their toes want to point. And so what we can do is use this swing activity, this swing exercise mode, to kind of combat that. It's going to promote extending the leg and pulling the toes up to counter your toes pushing down. So this is the full action would look something like this. It's going to extend out and lift my toes up together and then back. So it's going to ask me to select my shin stimulation first. I just figured out that I like it at 30. And then quad stimulation, I think my quads also liked 30. Yep, that's perfect. Timer activated stimulation, 10 reps. Tap the go arrow. Once this timer ends, I'm getting quad stimulation and shin stimulation together. I'm extending and lifting my toes up at the same time. Remember, you do not have to bring your foot back into that 90-degree position. You can have it out in front of you if you would like. Wherever your foot can relax, wherever you can do this. You can also do the long sit. You guessed it. I can do a quad set and lift my toes up together. This would be kind of a regression for it, but we're not going to have much of a progression outside of standing and imitating the swing portion where I extend out like this. So this would be, a variation of increasing the challenge if you feel that you're able to do it successfully. And then Adam, sorry, I just wanted to get that out of the way, and then you can discuss it if there's anything to discuss on that.
Just going to highlight the importance and how this transfers to gait. As you saw him doing that last standing exercise, it's extending the leg and pulling the toes up at the same time really puts the heel in a good position for a heel strike. So a good exercise to work on increasing the frequency that you strike your heel when you walk, having a strong quad and pulling the toes up mimic the late swing phase perfectly.
Great. And so we have just a few final questions. Again, thanks to all of you for joining and staying with us and for all of these great questions. So 2 questions that are actually going to tee up this next session, which is somebody had a question, do we have an example exercise programs that include how often to perform the exercises, as well as how many times a day should we do this to avoid fatigue? And so I think we'll be covering this next week. Do you all want to just quickly talk about next week's session?
Yeah, we're going to be going over exercise programming, so more so of the organization and how to create an exercise program and how the sleeve can kind of fit into that. So that's definitely going to be a topic we hit next week.
Great. All right, and then a few very final questions. how does one, so we actually had a few questions about like, hey, I haven't seen rockers, or people have different exercises available. So for anyone, if you saw these exercises and you don't have them enabled yet, just contact support@cyonic.com. And that's the fastest way, and we can get those enabled for you. And again, we'll respond based on where you are in your onboarding process. And then one question, hip flexors have been mentioned a couple of times. Are there any exercises that might help strengthen them, even indirectly?
I think we were planning on discussing that at the third and final AMA. Is that correct?
Great.
Yeah. So that's everybody show up to it.
Join us next week. And then a
Eager.
follow-up question on that is, where can I find previous recordings? So we have if you go to cyonic.com/support, there's a page that's live sessions is the URL. And so we'll have them there. Last week's session isn't up yet, but it will be soon. And then this session has also been recorded. This will also be put up there. Then one more question. So for the second part, when you're seated calibrating the sleeve, does it matter if the knee is bent at 90 degrees, or can it be extended forward slightly?
Is that for like gait mode?
Yeah, I think just calibration in general. Yep, for gait.
Yeah, as close as you can get it to the depicted image. You know, a 90-degree angle is okay, but I think it's a little bit better if it's like extended with a slight bend.
And you don't need to calibrate for exercises.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Do you always start with parameters set at the beginning, or the settings you tweaked to? So will the settings change, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the way I kind of demonstrated it is initially it's going to require that you set your settings, and then when you go into the exercise mode, every time thereafter, it's going to have whatever settings you saved. So you would test them and then adjust as needed. So like I had my shin set to, I had the 3 closest to the white dashed line. I had at 30 milliamps. It's going to save that. And then when I go into the exercise mode next time, I'm going to test it. And if I feel like I want more or less stimulation, I adjust it, and then I'm good to go.
Great. And then final kind of technical question, what if your toes evert? And so the pinky lifts, but the big toe does not lift. Dylan, do you mind just talking through? I think you demonstrated it slightly, but just one more time, kind of how you would adjust your knurl sleeve.
Yeah, and then just know, I'm going to just plug this real quick before I talk about it. There is on the Cyonic website, going to www.cyonic.com/dorsiflexion. That's going to be the place where you're going to see a really in-depth comprehensive coverage of myself and Becky talking about how to make these adjustments. But to answer it quickly, briefly, essentially, if your pinky toe side is lifting up more, that means that those gel pads are too far away from the shin bone. They're covering the peroneals, those ones that are they're further away from the muscle that lifts your toes up. So just bringing it closer to the shin bone, and just doing incremental adjustments until you find the sweet spot should be the way to solve for that in most cases.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. All right, and that is the last of our questions. Thank you again to all of you for joining. As soon as this is posted on the website, I did get a question, when are these typically live? It should be live within the next week. So we'll get the videos posted, and we'll send an email as well as a reminder about next week's last and final session. So thanks to Dylan and Adam for exercise session part 2. And thank you to everybody here for joining. If you have any other questions, please always reach out to support@cyonic.com. We can make sure to answer them next week. So thanks everybody so much for joining.